Good morning, everyone. This is Father Nate, missionary priest in Italy, and thanks for joining us today, May 24th, on No Greater Delight, our podcast on Marian feasts and Marian meditations. Well, today we have a great number of celebrations, and they take us all around the globe. One is, it says Europe. Well, we'll see why that is. Also, we go to Shanghai in China, and Rome, Italy, as well as Torre Perogil in Jaén, Andalusia, Spain. Okay, so to get us started, what is this feast that they're celebrating in all of Europe? Well, they're celebrating Our Lady Help of Christians, which takes us back to the 16th century. If you remember, this is the celebration of Our Lady of Lepanto, right? When the power of the Turks in the second half of the 16th century became so great that Europe was threatened. Pope Saint Pius V, who was reigning at the time, he caused the combined forces of Christendom to turn against the enemy in what was called the Holy League, and then asked all of Christendom to pray the rosary for their success. Right? So the enemy was routed at Lepanto after a 5-hour struggle, while the Holy Father knelt praying before a picture of Our Blessed Lady. Right? Suddenly, the Blessed Virgin Mary appeared in a vision and told the Pope that in that very hour the enemy had been defeated. Right? The Ottoman Turks had not been defeated in a major naval engagement during the memory of any living man. Right? So it's for that reason that Pope Saint Pius V ordered the invocation Mary Help of Christians to be added to the Litany of Loreto. Right? Some years later, the French Emperor Napoleon Bonaparte took the Papal States and had Pope Pius VII confined to prison. The Pope remained captive for 5 years, beginning in 1808, when Our Lady once more came to the aid of her faithful children. The Emperor himself was forced to abdicate and was exiled to the island of Elba. Right? The Holy Father returned to Rome in triumphal procession, in which many images of the Blessed Virgin Mary were crowned along the way to the Vatican. So Pope Pius VII, in thanksgiving for his deliverance, with his own hands crowned the picture of Our Lady Venerate at Savona, where he was first imprisoned, and ordained that the 24th of May be kept as a special feast in Mary's honor, under the title of Mary Help of Christians. Right? It's in commemoration of these great historical events that Pope Pius VII, on September 15th, 1815, instituted the feast of Our Lady Help of Christians to be celebrated on May 24th. Right? It said that, interestingly enough, this feast never actually extended to the universal church calendar, but it spread throughout the world thanks mostly to the missionary efforts of the Salesians, founded by John Bosco, who have taken Mary Help of Christians as their patroness. Now we will go across the globe to Our Lady of Shishan in Shanghai, China. Right? So the shrine is dedicated to Our Lady of Shishan, which is located in the district of Songjiang, near the great metropolis of Shanghai, and dedicated to Our Lady Help of Christians of Shishan. Right? It was way back in 1863 that the Jesuit superior of the community in Shanghai purchased the south side of the mountain of Shishan, which has a beautiful panorama of bamboo forest, right? On this site, they started beginning a retreat house with a small chapel next door and the shrine as well. On March 1st, 1868, the Bishop of Shanghai, Adrien Languillat, who was a Jesuit himself, consecrated the chapel and blessed the image of Our Lady Help of Christians. During the attack of rebels from the army of Taiping, the Jesuit superior in Shanghai, Father Gu Zhenxiang, went up the mountain of Shishan to pray to our Blessed Mother, and said, "If the diocese is saved from the attack of the rebels, we'll build a basilica here in thanksgiving for Our Lady's special protection." Sure enough, the diocese was spared from destruction, and so in September of 1870, Father Gu made known his invocation to our Mother and the promise he had made. So, on May 24th, 1817, the feast of Our Lady Help of Christians, in the presence of 6,000 people, the Bishop of Shanghai presided the ceremony of the laying of the cornerstone of the new church. 3 years later, on April 15th, 1873, I guess that's 2 years later, Bishop Languillat himself consecrated and inaugurated the great basilica on the mountaintop. So every May 1st and 24th, the basilica welcomes great numbers of pilgrims, not only from China, but also from other countries in Asia. I'm not sure if that's so true anymore, but in any event. So it's a very beautiful place, and it says at the request of Bishop Languillat in 1874, Pope Pius IX gave the gift of an indulgence for all pilgrims who complete the pilgrimage to the shrine during the month of May. Then we go back to Italy, back to Europe, where they celebrate Madonna della Strada in Chiesa del Gesù in Rome, Italy. Right? So this goes back to the 5th century, so that's obviously way before the Jesuits, in 425, when the Astali family built a small shrine to Our Lady in one of the districts of Rome. So sometimes this image was called the Madonna degli Astali, or the Madonna of the Astali family, which later became known as the Jesuits' Madonna della Strada, Our Lady of the Street. After the Jesuits were established in 1540, Pope Paul III gave the first church to St. Ignatius and his companions in February 1541, right? After the former pastor and owner of said church, Peter Codasio, became a Jesuit. The name of the church was Santa Maria della Strada. In 1568, Cardinal Alessandro Farense erected the Gesù Church of Rome, the mother church of the Jesuits, in place of the church of Santa Maria della Strada, in which the icon Madonna della Strada was displayed, right? So the tradition was to commemorate shrines and churches that had already been on the land before by setting aside chapels for, like, inside the bigger and newer churches, right? So that's why you have, in the Church of the Gesù in Rome, you have the Chapel of the Madonna della Strada, right? Because it houses the icon that was originally housed in the Madonna della Strada church that was there before they built the Church of the Gesù, right? Very nice here. So it says the feast was restored to the proper calendar of the Society of Jesus in 2014. Last but not least, we jump over to Andalusia, Spain, where they celebrate Nuestra Señora de las Misericordias, Our Lady of Mercies, who is the patroness of Torre Perogil in Jaén, Spain. So they don't know who made this image, but they think that it was made in Córdoba, Spain. It's an image that desired to stay in Torre Perogil on May 24th, 1516, right? Because there was a group of, they were processing with the statue to Seville. They were taking it, yes. Coming from Seville, they were containing this image of Our Lady of Mercies, and they were going to Segura de la Sierra. So, in front of this image, Maria Isabel Tijola, a woman who was born or who was missing her right hand, prayed in front of the image, and she miraculously recovered her missing arm, right? And so when she showed her new arm to the authorities, they immediately went to the place and saw that this group that was possessing, their oxen, were incapable of moving. So they said, okay, Our Lady wants to stay here. And they moved the statue to this little hermitage of St. Christopher. There began the veneration, and she soon won the hearts of all the people of that place, who greatly increased in their devotion. And so that is what we are celebrating in the Marian world today, May 24th. For today's Marian meditation, taken from the book by Father Ildefonso Villar, we start with meditation 74, entitled Mary's Last Years. And here, well, it's funny because the next point is point 2, but there's never really a point 1, but it's sort of an introduction. We do not know for certain, but it is easy to guess how our Heavenly Mother passed the last years of her life. First, it must have been a life of prayer. The whole life of Our Lady was a life of prayer, since she never lost sight of the presence of God, either before or after the Incarnation. However, towards the end of her life, this prayer was bound to be even more intense. How could she spend one single moment without thinking of her beloved Son? Would she not think of him constantly? Would she not incessantly recall his words, his miracles, his preaching, his passion and death, his resurrection and ascension, his love for men? The Gospel says that Mary used to keep whatever Jesus said, even from childhood, deep in her heart. And apart alone, she would meditate on it. Could she now live without this meditation, she who only lived of Jesus and for Jesus? On the other hand, her duties as mother were already terminated. Her household work no longer occupied her, for she was lovingly taken care of in the house of St. John. Consequently, all her time would be spent conversing with her Son, her God. It is natural to suppose that often, perhaps daily, she would visit the spots sanctified by the one-time presence of her Son. Accompany her on these visits, and see her enter the Garden of Olives, to spend there a long time remembering the agony of Jesus. See her climb Mount Calvary, one by one going over the stations of the cross, prostrating herself at the place of the crucifixion, kissing the tombstone of the Holy Sepulchre, and returning once more through that street of sorrows, as she did on the day of her solitude. Ask Our Lady to accompany you, especially when you make the Stations of the Cross or meditate on the Passion. How devout and loving would this prayer of the Virgin be? For today's reading from The Admirable Heart of Mary by St. John Eudes, we continue with Chapter 9, entitled Heart of Mary, Sanctuary, Censer, and Altar of Divine Love. Mary's is the heart represented by the golden censer held in the hand of the angel mentioned at the beginning of the 8th chapter of the Apocalypse. So that's the book of Revelation, chapter 8, verse 3. It is a golden censer, to show that Mary's immaculate heart is unmixed love, as typified by pure gold. The angel in whose hand it is held is the angel of the great council, namely, of our blessed Savior himself, to show that the Holy Heart of Mary always belonged to God alone, and that it was ever possessed and guided by the angel of the great council. If the heart of an earthly sovereign is in the Lord's hand, to be ruled as he wills, how much more truly the heart of the Queen of Heaven? The angel of the great council fills the censer with fire from the altar, adding great quantities of incense, which are the prayers of the saints, to signify that the Son of God filled his Holy Mother's heart with the sacred fire he had come to bring upon earth, and that all the adoration, praise, and prayers of her virginal heart proceed from the adorable heart of Jesus. The prayers of the saints are placed in Mary's heart, represented by the gold censer, to make us understand that the saints place their prayers, and all their praise and adoration rendered to God, in the admirable heart of the incomparable Mother of their Savior, that being united to her prayers, their own may become more acceptable and efficacious in the sight of the Divine Majesty.
Hello, and we hope that you enjoyed listening to our Marian podcast. In the spirit of Saint Bernard of Clairvaux, we say to you that there is no greater delight than to spread the devotion of Our Lady. We hope you share these sentiments and encourage you greatly to share with a loved one. Know that you are always in our prayers, and we ask that you keep us in yours. God bless.